Yeah, Maddie, dude. Hell
All
yeah!
right.
I'm really glad you were available.
Yeah, you caught me on a good day.
Yeah, righteous.
All
And
right.
plus, it's just good to hear you again. But anyway, go ahead, Cody. I'm sorry. Man.
All right. So we were just talking about a couple of topics and everything, but this is a sensible version of the truth. We're a Facebook group that talks about politics, philosophy, all sorts of different topics. Just kind of whatever provocative thought you may have, we can talk about it. And so I'm gonna read a couple of things from our group, and I want to introduce a couple of people, moderators and members here. We have David, Jeremy, John, Maddie, and me. My name is Cody. Um, let me see here. So this is a group for polite, sensible, intelligent conversation, debate about the world and its politics. A place where civilized people can feel relaxed and free to express themselves. You can be skeptical but not cynical, negotiable but not argumentative, smart but not smug, individualist but not isolated, brave but not arrogant, lighthearted but not flippant, educated but not exclusionary. Uh, Barbarians and bigots will not be tolerated. So this is a fun little project that we've all had going on for a little while. Had a lot of fun talking about a lot of different things. It's just a good place to come in and give your opinion and not be, attacked, outright the way a lot of other places on the internet are. So this is a little oasis we hope to be constructing of critical thought and conversation. Um, but we were just talking about a couple of things about Facebook, so I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the analytics and numbers.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. We're a really young group. We started out actually as an offshoot. Zach's our founding member. This was back when Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails started making some pretty strict and to the point political commentary, and the Nine Inch Nails fandom kind of exploded. And so Zach got tired of all the stuff. He founded us up. So since then we've been growing. It's only been cooking not too long, but let's see. Our biggest, God, easy 2/3 of our membership is from UK. We got about 150 US folk, quite a few Canadians, Australians, French, Spanish, Germans, Australians, Brazilians. Lots of people. It's a little bit more equal than a lot of these online political discussion groups. Still looking to get plenty of representation, make sure everybody gets a voice. But yeah, things are going good. But we had started talking about. I really liked what we were talking about before we hit record on this. But the metrics and trying to advertise on Facebook. John, you had started off on saying that you've been trying to mess with Facebook advertising. What were you saying there?
So I was going to say, in my job, I work a lot with Facebook advertising to, publicize our products, to get them out there in front of people. And like Maddie said, it is just you have to pay to play. There's just no other way to do it. Now we have a significant enough advertising budget that we can, get some significant feedback. But what the issue I kind of want to just raise is, if we live in a world where the way that your information gets out there is simply if you have enough money to promote it. That to me becomes problematic after a while. And I mean, especially with what we've seen from the 2016 election, how easy it was for, people with special interests to just basically, manipulate the voting population, put things out there and publicize information that wasn't true and that was false. I think that's a very scary and nefarious thing. And I'm wondering, what anybody here, thinks about that and how that can be combated.
So much of it that war was. It's interesting. That war was fought by attention. Um, there's gosh, what was it? There was over 90% of the people targeted by Russians were African American.
Yes.
And a lot of these, but it didn't. Yeah, that was very surprising. And voter turnout went down in African American
The way
communities.
that they targeted them, the message that they promoted was don't vote at all. It's not worth it.
Yeah, and but
The,
it's
yeah.
funny how these pages grew in the first place. Though they ended up targeting highly specific political routes, but they opened in really bizarre ways. Uh, there was I'll pull up the person's name you should look up. But these meme pages, well, rather these pages that became political action meme pages, the fake news sites and stuff like that, they opened as one of them started, for example, as a Kermit the Frog sipping tea meme. Y'all have all seen it. And it put out a bunch of those memes.
Wow.
When growth stagnated, they switched to a Homer Simpson based meme format. When that stagnated, they completely changed their name, their aesthetic, and everything, and started being pro Jesus and not even doing memes, shit like for Jesus and share for Jesus, and that got a lot of traction. And then they switched to a show or to a meme page that reviewed or commented on shows, and it's very interesting to see how they fought this attention war. And we were talking about pay to play. This is when we said earlier that even major content creators with massive followings can't even get their default posts to go to the audience that already likes and engages with that creator, just to get their stuff to show up on their target audience's newsfeed. How do you play the game? How do you get people's attention?
It's mind-boggling. I mean, just, you know how we've all experienced it, where you maybe go to Amazon.com and you look at a thing you want to buy, and then suddenly the next 20 days that thing pops up everywhere you go on the internet. And it's just, I went to conservativereview.com once, and I've gotten more conservative review advertisements on my Facebook page than any other advertisement combined. I mean, it's insane. And I've hidden these posts and they still keep coming back. And it scares me. Like, I'm a liberal person. Anyone who looks at my page would know I wouldn't engage with that content anyway, and it's still showing up. It scares me how frequently and easily it is for, ideologies to be promoted like that, as long as there's a piggy bank behind it, I suppose.
Part of it, though, is literally the algorithm that is being used while you're connected to any network, right? So it's, let's say Facebook. Facebook is, they're famous for being invaders of privacy, essentially, right? They'll even come out and say it. They're listening through your microphone. Anytime you have your Facebook app open on your phone or you have it open on your computer, it's accessing your microphone and it's listening to what you're talking about. And so you can have a conversation about something, and about 30 minutes later, you're going to have an ad pop up about that. Google does the same thing. The amount of information that these servers essentially mine on you is mind-boggling, essentially. I mean, I worked for a tech company at one point, and what we would do to gather information on people was absolutely incredible. You could go to a website and you're trying to find out who owns it and how to contact them, and it doesn't have the owner on it. It doesn't have a contact number. It doesn't have an address. It basically has a fill out this form and write your message here, and you hit submit, and you don't even know the email it's going to go to. I could literally take the URL and pop it in one Google search and find out who owns it, where they live, their first name, their last name. I can find out their home phone number. I can find out what cell phone service they use.
Wow.
I mean, they're just constantly gathering information, and it's going through these algorithms, and that's why it's pushing that content to you.
Yeah, and I would argue, one positive of this is that, yes, businesses can promote to very specific audiences. They can get their message out there. But that double-edged sword is just, there's all this data out there about us that most people don't even know. And I mean, remember when Google and Facebook showed up in front of Congress to talk about this? And even our members of government had no idea how these things even worked. It's like we're using this tool that is just such a,
not to interrupt completely, just saying, like, when he asked when the senator, who was it, he asked the head of Google, basically how do iPhones work?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Or they even asked, how do search results work? Why did they said, how come when you search Donald Trump, all these like mean things pop up? And the guy's just like, that's not us. We're just basically scanning. Anyway, but what I was saying was, this double-edged sword of like, yes, we can now grow our businesses with advertising and target people that we've always wanted to target. But we're playing with this tool that we don't really know everything that it does. Consumers are playing with fire. I mean, they've got data out there about them that they don't know. They really don't know that somebody has this on them and can, send them a message on their phone.
I mean, it is a free service, so you got to kind of ask the question, you know, like when something doesn't cost any money, then you have a possibility of being the product. So while we're all interacting and everything on Facebook and on the internet, we're searching things and sharing things. We're providing information, data, you know, that better advertises to us, and that information is extremely valuable. So,
yeah.
do you think
people are purchasing that data?
Exactly.
In large quantities.
Yeah.
Do you think that level of data sharing, there should be a check on it, or is this perfectly fine?
Well, it's actually it's funny. So frequently, I'm less concerned about private companies having it than the government, and frankly, they've actually been rather I've been actually kind of impressed to the extent that which these tech giants are not letting governments, like when Apple very famously refused to make a backdoor for the FBI. That was a decision I love. Well done, Apple. You know, keep that shit under warrants. Don't give them skeleton keys to everything. I don't think that's a good idea. But
yeah,
even before worrying about how much data they're getting, and even before worrying about the tribalism that they were stoking with these campaigns, even before worrying about the fake news and the misinformation, I just wonder how much of it they're starting to know us so intimately that we have this endless ocean of distractions to swim through. And I mean, fuck, guarantee you the first thing y'all do is look at your Black Mirror every morning. That's the most sacred time of the day, is returning to consciousness. And the first thing we all do is we turn to the Black Mirror.
A good way to put it, returning of consciousness like that. And then we turn to the Black Mirror.
It's a sacred moment.
Yeah, it is. It is. The first thing I see in the morning is Jeremy Corvellis commented in a post on Sensible Version of the Truth. That's what brings me back to consciousness.
Yeah, and back into the foray of, oh my God, this shit is on fire.
Yeah. But to answer Cody, sorry, go ahead, whoever was speaking.
Where am I? Let's just find my picture again. Oh, I'll just put my video on. I mean, I don't find the Facebook adverts that intrusive, actually. I rarely click on them. When I go onto a website, I always press, I don't know if I should, but I always press accept cookies because I just think I'll probably get a more targeted advert and it won't be quite so annoying. But I don't know.
So you don't see any problem at all with people sharing your data without you knowing, or I mean, you have consented. You
probably should be bothered.
Facebook, you did agree.
But no, I'm not. No, no, I don't give a. I don't care.
Yeah,
but I'm sure there's people in other positions that need to care even more. I mean, I don't know. Where do you think? Where do you think it goes bad?
I think it goes bad when you find things like, you know, your identity being stolen, right?
Yeah.
Because that data is so readily available.
Yeah.
It makes things like that so much easier. So, you know, to your point, it's kind of, where do you cross the line? How can you go too far? Well, that would be one way, at least to me personally.
Well, it's enabled stalking. There are some prominent people who've had to leave social media entirely because it was enabling stalkers. Of course, they may have been posting too much intimate details, but
well, I mean, it doesn't take much.
Yeah, that's very true.
Maybe that's
you had said something, Maddie. You said something just now. Let me think on it. Try to remember.
Well, I saw an interesting idea recently about I can't remember who it was. I wish I could. It was a TED Talk about how we are segregating ourselves because of the internet and the way that we do searches. So like when, like let's just say dating, when if you want to meet someone, you can go find someone that thinks exactly the way you do and does everything you do, and y'all could be soulmates, and you could never talk to each other. You know, you could narrow it down that quickly without ever having to interact with anyone. And this happens on Facebook and with Google, and that, you know, the internet just wants give us more of what we already have. So it's segmenting us, you know, like if you go visit a liberal page, it'll show, hey, you like this one, maybe you'll like this other liberal page and this other liberal page. And then we get in these bubbles, you know, and we're resegregating ourselves on the internet.
It's almost like we stand divided and conquered. It's like we are in our own segments, and we partition walls around those segments, and we try and push forward within those segments, but we can't understand that we need to understand everyone a lot more to accept each other's differences and realize that we all have a unified goal. And we need to push towards that despite our differences. Like, again, people
I'm sorry,
are
Zach.
extremely the opposite of what we are. Like, we have many differences between, like, the left stands so divided and so conquered because the left are thinkers. We create problems, and we try and dissect the minutiae of such small things to the point where we create division within ourselves.
Yes.
Whereas the right have a unified, toe the line, keep our head down, we need to have power kind of ideal.
Precisely. Precisely. We see that in the United States, as I'm sure you see it in the UK. The Republican Party stands more united. Whereas, you know, like you said, the Democratic Party with more liberals, they pick at minutia. They segment themselves in many cases to the point that there isn't a general unity of purpose in the group. And I think that's a bit detrimental.
The biggest poll in the Democrats seems to be the argument between the ones who like to stick with the civil discussion type talking points, the Republican light, the Affordable Care Act, we'll continue the drone strikes. That's the sort of, you know, that's people were saying that about Clinton. It'd be an extension of the Obama administration. And Obama actually would have run as a fairly successful. I'm gonna mute Zach there. Sorry about that. Obama really didn't start tackling truly liberal things, which Obama is what Democrats keep getting painted as these radical leftists that are. I've heard this quote said by right wingers: hungry for power at all and any costs.
You mean themselves?
I don't see it.
It's quite projection, I think. If anything, the Democrats don't even seem to like power. They lose so frequently.
Yeah, I'm of the mind that they are paid to lose. You know, that they are the controlled opposition. You know, that's where good ideas go to die. And it bothers me a lot that, you know, because I almost feel ashamed, like when people say, well, who do you vote for? You know, I typically vote Democrat, and I almost feel ashamed of that because I don't agree with how the Democrats conduct themselves, you know, how they are.
Especially in Appalachia, dude.
I think a lot of us feel that way.
I mean, like the just even saying Democrat in Appalachia, even if you're talking with somebody who is ostensibly left-leaning in especially their social values, the aversion to the name Democrat in West Virginia, East Tennessee, you know, shit, all the way up to Maine, as long as you're sticking to that mountain range, it's synonymous with being abandoned, and this feeling of there's welfare state as
boil it all down to, oh, you're okay with killing babies. I see.
Yes, it always comes down to abortion. You want to talk about, well, let's talk about single-payer health care. I guarantee you, abortion will be brought up by the end.
The tragic irony here is that these groups of people you're talking about are the ones who rely the most on the government. And I don't say that like to be, you know, hyperbolic, but it's very true because rural communities,
statistically true, yeah.
Rural communities rely on the government. They rely on the USDA. They rely on the Department of Commerce. They rely so much on government money. And there have been cases where Southern politicians have accepted government money and then told the government, try not to tell them that the government gave us this money. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It's just such cognitive dissonance. That just to have this, you know, this general attitude of we don't rely on the government and then to go ahead and rely on the government. It's just like, why do we hide that from ourselves? What is the point of to like cater to this ideology and not just look at the the reality. The government does things for you. It does these good things for you. Stop throwing it away to just kowtow to some ideology of self-reliance. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, the parts of the conservative dogma that I buy into a little bit is should things be a little bit more localized? Like if you're going to say I'm against big government because I want the things that the federal government to be done on the state or local level, sure, that's a great conversation to have. You know, like what kind of things, education is kind of an open conversation for me, whether we should have a federal standard, you know, for the argument for being, well, you don't want someone in Alabama having a drastically different education from someone in California. You know, you want to have some kind of standard, but as a progressive,
our standard is currently dominated by Texas, by the way.
Yeah, that most of the textbook producers are in Texas. So when their education board decides what will be taught and, you know, how they're going to teach it, that's where they go because they're the largest buyers of textbooks. So rather than produce a textbook for Alabama or in Texas or Tennessee or Florida or whatever,
I had zero idea that existed. So
it's
absolutely.
I highly recommend the documentary "The Revisionists" on this. It chronicles their censoring of one of the latest editions of a U.S. history textbook. Some of their changes are disastrous. Some of them are just downright petty. They removed hip hop from the section of American folk music, which it quite literally is. It is literally American folk music. Mm-hmm. So, you know, one of those things. David, I think you were about to say something.
Oh, I was just trying to draw some parallels with what you're saying about government and say what we might say about the police force as well. It's kind of an ideological thing of being like kind of anti-police. But then I think, yeah, but if you was with your grandmother and they got mugged, you would call them, wouldn't you? You know, I was just thinking that's another kind of parallel to where our ideology and our actual way we behave and the things we do don't always match together, do they?
Exactly. We mentioned that a bit earlier, before everybody got here, but just this. For one thing, it's hypocritical for somebody on the left to be so distrustful of the police that they say we need to abandon police entirely. And we say, but no, the existence of a police force is still necessary.
I'm glad you said this. This is something that came up earlier. I was talking with somebody who outright made the claim that the act of policing is in and of itself immoral. And I think you're going to have a very fundamentally different conversation when you're arguing with somebody who wants to talk about police brutality, which I agree with is a problem, or structural racist policies, various things. If you want to, you can't have really concrete, detailed, constructive conversations about these topics if you have a fundamental moral disagreement. And really, that's happening politically. You see that if even certain morals are held differently by those on the right, those on the left. Those on the right tend to value authority and sticking to tradition and respectability. Respect the man, respect the position, not the man. You hear all the time. And while on the left, there's more of you hold up high on a pedestal acceptance of new ideas and well, let's try things new. Unfortunately, I actually have to go. I wish I could keep here and talking. By all means, keep talking without me. I love you all. I wish I could have gotten to talk to Zach. I really do. It's been far too long, man.
It has. It really has.
Oh, that was sudden.
But seriously, and Maddie, thank you for joining us. I hope you stay after I leave. You and me need to catch up, and I hope you come to the next one. The next thing, I think this is actually going kind of interesting. Anyway, love you all. Peace.
Farewell, man.
See you. Yeah, nice to see you. That was sudden.
But picking up where he left off, I completely agree with the whole absolutist mentalities, where you can't have a honest conversation about some things, where we can talk about tax structure. It's in the Constitution. The government has the ability and authorization to tax its people. I am all over that conversation for what those taxes should be, what they should be on, what they should go for. I love having those conversations. But when you open it to, well, taxation is theft and therefore immoral and it should be illegal. I don't know how you talk to that.
can.
I don't know how you do that, because that's just not what the makeup of our government is. You know, that's not how things work. Every industrialized country has taxes, and those taxes go towards things that help the public in a lot of cases. So I completely agree with Jeremy when we're talking about this absolutist, you know, when someone says there should be no policing, you know, it's like, okay, clearly you have a problem with policing, but let's nail down what that problem is and see how to make it better. And I don't think it's very sensible or reasonable to say it's immoral and that we shouldn't have it.
To go back to what Zach brought up earlier, so let's just talk like, you know, division versus unity. And I feel like the dichotomy of left versus right, it is becoming so politicized that it is literally just about dividing us. It is finding every conceivable thing that divides us. And this does just irreparable damage to the political conversation in general. And I want to share this passage from this book that I'm reading. But there's just this one phrase that just scares the hell out of me, where the scientist is talking about how the government is politicizing scientific research. And she ends the passage by saying, there will no longer be truth and falsehood in the future. There will just be stories with two sides to them. And this is starting. This is the very beginning of that is starting now.
Yeah, especially with the Trump administration saying that you can't use certain phrases or words, like you can't say anthropogenic climate change in their scientific research. And there's actually some statutes within our government that say that when scientists within the government and they receive funding, that they have to submit things that are truthful. You know, so if your findings are, you know, option A, then you can't go through and say, well, option A is not allowed, so we'll just have to dance around it. You know. It lowers the quality and usefulness of that research, and that's what it's for. The research is to it's to make a point, is to draw lines, to try and figure out deeper meaning and deeper truths. And when you poison that with political, you know, leanings, you ruin it.
Exactly, you ruin it. Go ahead, Zach.
I was just thinking about what Jeremy was saying about the police force and stuff, and like. How would you guys feel about like a completely automated, like almost Judge Dredd, but with computers? Because it's like the idea that if the police force are completely morally just, why do they have keys for their lockers? It's the idea that there is a fault in humanity that lies at the floor of humanity, so they cannot be morally just, and they always have this sway. They have this opinion, which is why everyone who drives a car or rides a bike has a body cam in case they get in contact with the police.
That's a really good point. I'm just thinking back to, I had a friend of mine who published a book that was about police brutality in the Black community. And as he was going on a flight, the TSA searched his bags, and they pulled out this book and they said, "What's this book about?" And they detained him for 3.5 hours because they did not like the content of that book. So it was that particular TSA officer who had an opinion and a prejudice that he brought to his job that allowed him, because he was in that position of, you know, policing, to just detain this man for 4 hours, make him very uncomfortable, you know, really ruin his flight, ruin his trip, you know, and scare him.
Exactly. A police officer has the potential to ruin someone's livelihood and their life. And the rigmarole and the process that is required to go through to become a police officer is nowhere near. It should be on the level of a university degree to actually be able to understand the law, understand your restrictions as a law enforcer, and understand the rights of the person that you are inflicting your power upon.
Exactly. And I think in the U.S., police training lasts between 8 and 6 months. And in that time, you have to become a social worker, a lawyer, a medic. You know, there's all these different hats you have to wear when you're a police officer. And are we sending our police officers out with subpar training? You know, like, are they ready? You know, you can't answer every problem with force. And most problems are made worse with force. So
Exactly.
How can we better like when you say like should we have like the like an automated kind of way, like like Judge Dredd? I'd say you still need that human element to it, because it's still people dealing with people, but we can greatly increase the training, so that we can have less mishaps, less problems,
Yeah, 100%.
Sorry.
No, I wanted to say really quickly, I just wanted to say 100% on board with Zach that, a university style training for a police officer would significantly improve the ability of that human being to be a better police officer and just be prepared for every variety of, confrontation. Go ahead.
Do you think there's been improvements to the police in public interaction in the UK, Zach?
Well, that's very different. In the UK, obviously, we've had thousands of police officers cut. And it was Margaret Thatcher who said, we won't have a proactive police force. We won't go out and find problems. We'll literally react to problems that happen. And I think the idea of the Bobby on the beat, like the guy who understands his community, works with the community, lets the odd guy off who's smoking weed, doesn't say anything about it, but he understands who's selling that guy weed, and he's got an eye on that guy, like a personal idea of justice rather than so these are the two options. You either invest a lot of money into the police force and you have a personal local justice system where it's like these kids are doing no harm, they've got nowhere to go, they're hanging around outside shopping centres just drinking alcohol and doing nothing. We're not going to arrest them even though it's against the law to smoke and drink on this premises. So you either invest money into it or you have a completely automated one, a system which gets rid of any idea of like the police officer's discretion, and it all goes down to the judiciary system. So the judiciary has to be balanced, based, and fair after it's gone through this automated filter of this is illegal. So I think the sensible thing is to have sensible people on the streets doing things, but the government insists on cutting and cutting and cutting police funds, so that's not possible. So they have to transfer the funds to the judiciary if they're going to do that. There's no happy medium of these two things.
I agree, and even in America, people who work as police officers, they don't make a very good living. They make maybe $30,000, $40,000 a year. They're stressed out. They're not really in ideal conditions to be enforcing the law in a sensible way. I think the communal way of doing it would be much better. Somebody from that community who wanted to have a career in law enforcement, who knew, the people, the kids on the corner, that kind of thing. I think that goes a lot in terms of policing community sensibly and effectively than just having someone from, the academy showing up out of nowhere. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah,
I was taking it to a greater extent where would there be just a drone dropped from a helicopter or something, and it would just analyze all of these law-breaking scenarios, and then 2 months later it'd be like, you have to appear in court because you done this 2 months ago. They're the two extremes that we're working towards. It's either you have people on the ground acknowledging people, or you have this malignant intelligence, which the UK has pretty much 2 CCTV cameras per person or something, has more CCTV and surveillance than the whole of America.
Wow, I did not know that.
It's insane.
Yeah, I think that there's actually a lot of great legal arguments against traffic cameras and stuff like that. I know a lot of people don't like a month after you run a red light or you accidentally did something at a traffic stop or whatever, and you get a ticket for it later. Are you obligated to do that? I mean, they have a picture of you breaking the law, but it wasn't a human being that noticed this. And
and think about that, if you think about that exact situation, what if somebody, in front of you, a driver did something, and so thus you had to go through that red light?
Right,
it doesn't
no person to evaluate that. Yeah.
There's no human context of evaluating that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think police officers having body cameras and all, like, these are all great improvements. There's been suggestions from Obama's Justice Department that Trump did away with, but they were pretty solid ideas. Some of them were that the police officers should maybe live in the communities that they police. That way they can build rapport with that community, that they are invested in how their community is orchestrated. And you don't have that when you live on one side of town and then you come into work and you patrol another side of town, that you don't know those people, and so you may treat them as less, or you need to be, because you're just as much of a part of that community. You need to be able to relate to it.
Yeah.
And that's a simple, and that would take a long time to do and a long time to orchestrate, but that's a goal to shoot for.
Exactly.
Is to have police officers be more relatable to their, what are they called? Precincts?
Yeah. And this is all we're asking for is sensibility, right? This is all we ever ask about is a sensible way of going about these things. And instead, we have this ideological war that inherently corrupts the way that we want to do things. This book that I'm reading tells me a lot, because there are lots of career officials in the government who do their jobs effectively and sensibly. And so our country runs fairly smoothly. And the risk that has been happening is that the Trump administration, to use one administration, I don't know about the Tories in the UK, but they're basically filling out all of these government positions in agriculture, in commerce, in education with ideological people, not people who have backgrounds or experiences in these, things, just ideological, pontificators. And so thus, instead of approaching the situation logically and looking at the data and making an informed decision, they make an ideological decision based on no data, based on no experience.
This is exactly the idea of someone appointing someone who has a background in that professional field. I thought that was a great idea, and then I realized, like, the way that's how it does work in America. But it turns out that whoever appoints that person in their position is just backing up their own idea of that position. So it doesn't work, because in the UK you have ministers and they are appointed to different things regardless of their background. It's just like the Prime Minister says, I think you'll be good at this, so you do this. Whereas in America, it's like, oh, you was like working at Bell Helicopters or whatever. Or like,
yeah, well, in America, it wasn't always like that. In the past, even between a Republican and a Democratic transfer of power, you had a good 70% of those people in those jobs who would stay on because they had the skills and the experience necessary to continue doing that job well. And it's only been fairly recently, I would say after the 2000 election with George Bush, that it's become more of an ideological battle of putting, like you said, someone from Bell Laboratory who works in communication, who has like a privatized, stake in the way that
Condoleezza Rice, wasn't she? She was with something that was terrible, and then she got appointed.
I think she worked for a defense company, a defense contractor who made, military equipment, and thus she was, making it easier to go to war because then you make more money, making military equipment. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't always like that, is the sad thing, and I feel like it's getting worse.
Yeah, we have this revolving door problem in Washington where the people who are regulated by the government from like the banking industry. So the government body that regulates the banking industry, the people who are appointed to those positions are from the head of the banking industries. You know, so you get Goldman Sachs and Bank of America guys, and they're regulating their own industry, tilting the rules in their favor, and that. It blows my mind when I bring up this issue to some conservatives or libertarians, and they're like, "I don't see a problem with that. They have the experience." I'm like, "Yeah, they have the experience, but not the ethos." You know, like they clearly have a conflict of interest. Go ahead.
Oh no, sorry, Dave. I think David is itching to say something.
No, I don't. No, I don't think so. I was just a bit perturbed because my video was dancing a little while ago. But no, carry on. I will jump in.
Yeah, but there was this guy. There's a guy who's unappointed by like anyone aside from the City of London, and the banks in the City of London appoint this guy, and he has a huge amount of say, and he sits the left or the right of the speaker, and he holds this huge chalice, and he is the voice of the Bank of London, and he has so much gravitas, but he is completely unelected, and he just has so much sway, and it's wrong. It is exactly like what you were saying about how people, in theory, it works. It's like you've had a lot of experience in the banking sector, so therefore you should run our economy. But in practice, it's like you have a lot of friends in the banking sector and you're a human, so you're going to run for their interests because you have this completely like Randian philosophy of everyone for themselves, I'm going to help my friends out. Whereas the premise of it is you're good at economics, you know how to run economies, so you'll be good in this position. But the practice of it is completely alien to that. It's a buddy system.
Exactly. And I think anybody who works in government has to have a balance of, you know, professional experience, but also the ethical underpinnings, you know, of somebody who actually gives a rat's ass about, you know, working hard to do something that's going to benefit people who don't have money. You know, you're not doing it for money. Really, at the end of the day, you're not doing it to make a paycheck. You're doing it because you say, I want to help out impoverished communities in my country. I want to make it so that kids in America eat more nutritional meals. And there are people like that in the government. And sadly, they are getting phased out right now. That's just the truth.
I mean, we have a Secretary of Education who does not believe in public education at all. We have a Secretary of the Interior who does not believe in environmental conservation. The head of the EPA doesn't believe in the EPA's mission to protect the environment. It blows my mind how we got here, you know, and how obvious it is to see, you know, when you hear these people talk about their policy and their background and their past, they are the worst person possible to have in that position, and yet a person like that finds their way into that position every administration, you know, and it's different degrees, you know, but you have these horrible compromises where, hey, we'll protect the environment, but the line that we will not cross is we will not hurt corporate profits. And that's not possible. It's just not possible. You know, wherever you gain somewhere, you're going to lose somewhere else in some of these policy discussions. And that's one of those things where you're going to fall on one side or the other. And most people on the left agree, you know, like if you don't think clean water is important, try drinking oil, you know, because that seems to be where our priority is right now. But it's amazing how we've corrupted government to this point, you know, where we have people who are just completely opposed to the sector of the economy or government or the municipalities that are regulated by these industries are just using them to set the rules in their favor. And I don't know many solutions to that other than getting the money out of politics. You know, these people would have less of a megaphone if they weren't able to give a politician that gets elected millions of dollars.
Is that the old man where it's just like politicians should be dressed like NASCAR drivers?
Precisely.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. If they came to work in a jumpsuit that had DuPont oil on the side, these are the people who own me, essentially. It's because you're not owned by the American people. You're not owned by the people who voted you in. You're owned by who's giving you the most money. And what I wanted to say on this whole point was maybe what we need is a cultural shift. I feel like the UK has a little more cultural identity artistically than the United States, because I think in the United States, we have this idea that the dollar, the almighty dollar, is the ultimate good. We really do believe that your worth is determined by how much money you have. And that's just not true. I mean, you can look at hundreds of years of philosophy and religion that say otherwise. The person who has the most amount of money is usually the person who's screwing over other people, who's not building the community, because he's only looking out for himself.
Well, it's getting a little bit like that in the UK, I'd say. I see a lot of materialism on the surface, unapologetically, Maybe I notice it more just because I'm older. I'm not too sure whether it's a trend, but it seems like people are not quite so. I think in the UK, people used to try and hide that attitude, but I think people are much more on the surface about that kind of materialistic kind of thing that you're talking about.
I agree entirely.
Yeah. I don't know if y'all have ever read Theodore Roszak about the technocracy, that started around the Industrial Revolution, but we've now shifted the metrics for human worth, like what can you produce, what can you make? It's not really about who you are or what you are or what you have to contribute. It's, how productive are you, and we measure that by how much money you have. And I see this all the time in conservative circles, like, oh, well, if they're rich, then they must be very intelligent. You can just automatically attribute all these different characteristics to them. Oh, if they're rich, then they must be very smart, and they must be very wise, and they must be very savvy, and they also must be very moral, because you can look at it from the prosperity gospel people, that believe that the richer you are, oh, well, that's because they're right with God, and God's allowed them to have these things. Like, these are completely
that's insanity.
Nonsense. Came over here.
Yeah, they're nonsense talking points, and they're bad metrics for evaluating someone's character.
It's not bad metrics. That's insanity. That is literal insanity. It's like
came over here, Zach.
Nothing is. Sorry, Dave. You go.
So I was just saying it. What Cody's talking about, the prosperity gospel, came over here big style.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you drive a nice car, if you live in a big house, that's because God blessed you with those things. It's because you're doing a good thing, when the things that you may be doing to earn that money may not be good things.
Yeah, it's because you've been a cunt to many people.
Sorry, I got to hop off real quick.
Oh, Maddie. Okay.
Sorry. I've been muted here for a minute, but I got to hop off. It's been a great conversation, and I hope I can join it next time.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
Nice. Nice to meet you, Maddie.
Nice meeting you guys.
Cheers.
Yeah, it's like it's false equations. It's like completely crazy to direct such things. There's no logic to that. There is literally just this is a neoliberal ideology that you've been indoctrinated into. So therefore, somebody makes a lot of money who doesn't pay their workers well, who may be morally much more, I don't know, nicer or fluid than them. Just the idea of money equating to knowledge, wisdom, and stuff like that. That must be an archaic ideology.
Well, it really turns into the idea of ruling by fear rather than ruling through love. Because let's say you work for a man and he pays, your wage. So you rely on that wage to live. You rely on that wage to raise your family. That wage is important to you, but you might not be getting what enough you deserve is. And yet you're so afraid that if I do one thing wrong, if I piss off my boss, suddenly I lose that pittance that I've been being paid, and suddenly I have nothing. And it's wage slavery is what it is. And I don't see how anybody could look at a man who lives in a lavish house and yet whose workers live in, you know, one-room shacks and say that that is a moral man and that's a stand-up man that I want to aspire to be like. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. So like Donald Trump famously said, you know, like, well, you got away with not paying taxes, and a lot of people would dodge it and whatnot. I don't think he's politically savvy enough to do that. So what he said was, well, I was smart enough to dodge taxes. You know, that's a horrible admission that you don't believe in what our government does. You know, you just don't care. You know, like you've been. If you're looking at it from a religious point of view, you've been blessed with all these great things, you know, that you've been able to prosper in this country under our laws and systems and economic system. And yet you are completely against building it up and making it better and contributing something back to carry it on to the next generation so that they can have that opportunity to do what you've done.
This is why education frightens me. You know, government not doing what they need for education, because we have just so much cognitive dissonance. Like, for example, you say, well, I look at Donald Trump as a smart man and a capable man because he cheated the government. And yet, let's say, a person who lives in poverty maybe gets $20 extra on their food stamps, and suddenly they're an evil person because they stole money from the government. Do you see how that doesn't correlate? I'm angry at the person who's poor, who maybe was able to get an extra $20 so they could eat, but I'm celebrating the man who stole, let's say, hundreds of thousands of dollars from the government and didn't pay people a fair wage. Why don't people see the discontinuity in that kind of thinking?
You've completely hit the nail on the head. It's like I'm worried about these benefit scroungers who are just taking all of these benefits, but the government giving tax breaks to billionaires. I am not angry about that. It's there's no connected thinking. There's no like, I'm gonna project the exact same moral compass to this person as this person, even though they're doing exactly the same thing, but there's a larger amount of money involved. It is just strange that these people can't. And you have to realise that it's all due to the media. It's 100% due to the media's projection of people and good businessmen. It's like Gary Barlow, the lead singer of Take That, and a famous English band and stuff, and he's on Children in Need, which is a charity program begging poor people or just average people to donate money to children in need, whilst he's dodging tax, which is equating to taking millions of pounds away from children in need.
Oh my God. And wasn't there a time in English history where, you know, people like Ebenezer Scrooge were supposed to be frowned upon?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we've completely forgotten what Charles Dickens taught us, right?
Well, everyone, it's been a pleasure, but I think I'm going to have to jump off as well. I've got some other things I need to take care of today. So I hope we've had a good conversation. I think we got some good content out of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
And Zach and David, such a pleasure talking to you guys, really.
And you, John. Yeah. Excellent.
Thanks a lot for coming.
I'll do it more often.
All right, no problem. I'll see you guys on the interwebs. Take it easy.
Farewell, man.
See you, 9-9.
Bye.
Right, we can get down to see.
No, I'm outnumbered.
What's going on, David? Are you on your phone? Because
it's all right. Don't worry. Yeah, I am. Yeah. Don't worry, Cody, because I don't understand UK politics in any sufficient detail to lose you, so you'll be okay.
Yeah, I'm really interested in what's going on over there. Like, I know it's a lot of economic and cultural turmoil, you know, and especially over this whole Brexit thing. I'm so lost in the politics of it that I want to just not look at it at all, you know. But how are y'all feeling about it? You're very optimistic with what's going on.
Well, I'll start because I know probably the least about all this Brexit stuff in that. But
You have your finger over the mic.
Oh, right, here we go. Whole. I think it's more of a I know it's going to have big impact, but I think it's better to see it as a symptom of a disease in the UK rather than the cause of it. Although it has caused a lot of division between people, but I think it's now also could be. As people are talking about calling for a second referendum and will it be this kind of deal or that, it could be a bit of I think what we should be doing is really focusing our energies on getting a decent government, regardless of in or out. You know, we just need somebody as principled as Jeremy Corbyn in government and the people who are around him.
I 100% agree with that.
So I think if they had a second referendum or any, I don't even know if that would even be a possibility or whatever. But I think the far right backlash would be much worse than that. They'll use things whichever way things go. You know, they'll use it, but I think it would be much worse actually if we ever had that second referendum, which a lot of Remainers were asking for. I think we just need to get Jeremy Corbyn in. That's all.
Yeah,
as soon as possible.
Do you think if you have a second referendum and it falls back the other way, that that would be like a huge bullet dodged by the UK? Like, would things just go back to normal, or are there further negotiations that had to be had? Like, are they going to let them back in?
There'd be so much bile from the far right. There would be a few pathetic riots, maybe, but there would be so much venom from the far right. I mean, the best thing, as Dave said, is to get Jeremy Corbyn in, whether we leave or not. But the thing is that Theresa May was on morning television today, and she said there's no possibility of a second referendum. I don't think we should do a second referendum because that goes against democracy. And in the next sentence, she said, if my deal for Brexit doesn't go through, I will push it through again and again until it does, kind of thing.
Well, then that's not democracy, because democracy is a conversation, you know, it's a debate, and it's okay to change your mind in a debate. You know, like you can want something and get in the middle of it, and 2 years later be like, "Ooh, this is much more than we thought that this was going to be." You know, we bit off way more than we can chew. So you're allowed to change your mind, you know, or change your perspective.
That's exactly it. It's people are scared of saying that it's okay to change your mind because people are like, we've done it once, and it's just insane. Sorry, Dave.
No, well, I will say something then. I mean, I can't remember really. I mean, I know it was the referendum was advisory and all that, but was there a big campaign before the referendum not to have a referendum? Can you remember any massive campaign about that, or did it happen too quickly?
I don't recall anything like that.
I remember a small statistic that they did on John Oliver's show back 2 years ago when they did Brexit, was that a massive uptick in Google searches for what is Brexit happened right after the vote. So it gives you the sense that maybe a lot of people did not know what they were voting on.
No, they didn't.
They didn't at all.
And John Oliver is a really good litmus test to the truth versus bias. John Oliver is the go-to guy to understand Brexit. Like, that is a good person to understand the mess of it all. John Oliver is good.
Yeah, I love John Oliver because he takes to heart one of the old adages that I love, is that if you're going to tell someone the truth, you better make them laugh or they'll kill you. You know. And that's why I love that. I think that's why things like John Oliver and Jon Stewart became so big and famous. And Jon Stewart himself said, you know, like, I'm giving credibility by how and I'm paraphrasing here, you know, like, but how terrible the media is at doing its job. You know, they'll say, well, this side says this and that side says that. And who knows the answer? Well, you're the media. Your job is to investigate. You're supposed to look into these things. You know, if someone says this number is 40% and the other person says this number is 30%, your job is not to report, well, this guy says this and that guy says that. We don't know. Your job is to find out, you know?
So it hasn't got to the point in America where, like, they are literally reporting tweets saying this person says this.
Exactly. That blows my mind.
It is that way in the UK. It's just like people have said this about this and they confuse that with reporting. It's like, literally, look at this list of tweets, and I'm just like, what?
Yeah, that's how people get their message out now. You know, is we have a platform that everybody or most everybody uses, and so that's where you go. You know, and so if I have an idea to discuss, I should do it in 140 characters, or I guess what was it 240 characters now? And that's the equivalent of an intellectual fart, you know, that you don't get much from that. You know, it's hard to have a policy debate on that. And a lot of people don't have the attention span. You know, that's why media is cut down into sound bites and clips. You know, you go and watch CNN or Fox News, whatever, they'll have 15 people on a panel and everybody will have 20 seconds to speak about a very complex topic. So all you get is the bumper stickers of what their policy is. So you don't actually get to talk about it. And that's just this huge failure of the media to get people informed about the issues. You know, I would love it if, and I don't watch a whole lot of mainstream media, but I would love it if things like CNN or Fox News or whoever would just have time during prime time to be like, hey, here's this new bill that's being proposed.
And dissect it.
Exactly. We've got someone from this side to give their perspective, and somebody from this other side to, with their perspective, and we're going to talk about it. You know, we're going to go through it, and we're going to say, well, these are the provisions within the policy, and this is how it's going to operate, and this is how it's going to be rolled out, and what are the ups and downs for that, and talk about it, inform people. You know,
this is why it's like I get my news from like CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, and RT. But in America, it seems like RT is like the equivalent of the opposite of Fox News.
I know that from the progressive side, they're picking up support because they are kind of poo-pooing at the whole Russiagate thing, which is fine, you know, but RT is state-run media, so it's fine to take any information that they give that can be corroborated. It's a news source, you know. So
is the BBC. So is Al Jazeera.
Exactly. Just take it all with a grain of salt. You got to understand their perspective on it. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Anything that involves the state that they are run by, you can take with a huge pinch of salt. But when it's outside of what they actually care about, then they seem to be a lot more concise, dissective, and impartial.
Examples, Zach, what do you mean? Sorry.
They've done this thing, 20-minute documentary on the Catholic Church and loads of priests which haven't been taken to court and where they've gone, what's happened to them, etc.
Yeah.
And obviously that's nothing to do with Russia, but no other news broadcasting network would have done that as far as I know.
Mm.
Yeah, like nobody here wanted to talk about the protest at Standing Rock, and RT was one of the people that covered it, and I was like excited that they were covering it because this is important. You know, they're trying to block this pipeline that's going through their indigenous lands, and they wound up losing that battle and building it anyway. And I believe part of the pipe, not under the river where they're worried about, has already sprung a leak somewhere. So like these things are not foolproof, you know, and I work in construction, you know, I'm an engineer, and nothing you build lasts forever and nothing you build is foolproof. It never is. It never will be. And so you have to take other people's concerns about it seriously. You know, they're saying, well, you can't build that here because we're worried about the environmental impact that it could have. You can't come back and say, well, this is what we want to do, and so therefore that's what we're going to do. No, you have to have that conversation. You have to cut that deal. If that means you have to build it somewhere else, then you have to do that.
And despite the fact that RT may be against American General, their MO is to atomize the populace and make them disagree with things. But when it comes to the pipeline that you're talking about, reporting specifically and reporting like exactly what is happening fits their agenda as well as being the truth.
Yeah. And I appreciate the perspective they bring to it, because, like, some questions have to be asked when you see things like that. Like, what's the Obama administration doing about this? I thought this was opposed to your policy. Should you give the easement to these, I forget the company name, to build this pipeline through this area when the people who inhabit that area are completely against it? Did they not have autonomy? Did they not have the democratic right to say no?
And what was RT's perspective on it?
I can't remember exactly what the perspective was, but I do appreciate them reporting on it, because the major news outlets did not want to talk about it. That this was a taboo controversy, and that worried me. Then it's like, okay, so when people like CNN, MSNBC, and ABC, and all these things don't want to talk about this issue, I gotta wonder, is that because some of these major advertisers for these media outlets are the fossil fuel industry? So they're gonna say, no, you can't talk about that, and therefore people go uninformed about it, and so we can't make decisions about it, because no one knows anything.
And like RT also, they don't just give a platform, but they give a platform to people like Slavoj Žižek, but they gave a channel to Max Kaiser. They gave a channel to George Galloway. And
there's a really great lawyer that I like. He's got a peculiar last name, Pompeo, or no, that's the our foreign relations guy. But he goes after corporations for corruption and pollution, and has done a lot of great work bringing some things to light, especially things like the DuPont Corporation producing Teflon, and all the information and data that they hid about how dangerous it was to fetuses, and that they knew these things. And so they had these women have defective births, and they shut them up, that they could not talk about it. And that a lot of scientists today say that, or the scientists that they talked to in the documentary, was that there won't be very many babies born today that don't have Teflon in their blood. And that's a problem. That's a huge problem. It's a carcinogen, So we're having these huge upticks in the amount of cancer and heart disease and all these health issues. There's a problem with how we produce things, and we have to regulate these things, And
that is plastic. Plastic is the problem.
It's the oil industry and the steel industry, things like that. They use the most profitable way possible to produce these products and extract these resources, and that's not always best for the environment. It's not always best for the people who live in that area. So I remember Rex Tillerson, who was our Secretary of State before Pompeo. He was the CEO of ExxonMobil, and they were getting into fracking and whatnot. He lives in North Texas or Oklahoma, I think, and he petitioned the government to not drill around his house for fracking. And it's like, okay, but it's okay to do around everyone else's house, and people are lighting their tap water on fire. People are getting sick. People are getting birth defects. It just says a lot when this is your primary way of making money and you don't want it anywhere near you.
It says it all, and there should be legislation to make that illegal.
Yeah. Now you're going to hear from the right. That's overreach. That's regulation. That's that you're stopping that guy from being profitable, and you're interfering with the markets. You have to say the hell with that sometimes, and say people's lives are more important.
Yeah, there's a big picture.
Yeah, there's absolutely a big picture, and it's not about us. That's the biggest thing that we always come back to, especially on the left, is it's not about me individually. A lot of times, in America, if you have enough money, you can be fine. When you reach a certain amount of wealth, you may not even have to worry about the law anymore. You can buy your way out of anything. And we've got this what used to be a classless society, where the guy at the bottom rung and the guy at the top rung were considered the same, that we're both hold the same amount of value. And we've taken a step back from that. And as that gap widens, you have to turn to your fellow man and sometimes and be like, okay, are you okay with this? Because if not, we have to team up together in some way. We have to democratize this in some way so that we have some say in it, so that we can fight back in some kind of way. And unfortunately, and it's not very fun to say, that takes the form of government, sometimes. It takes the form of regulation and laws, and that's how it's been done, and that's how it's, I'm open to ideas. If there's a way to make money off something and protect people, by all means,
Well, I think that leftists and libertarians are the most frustrating type of people there are.
Yeah.
We have a lot in common with them. I mean, it's like we want the freedom to, I don't know, smoke weed, do what we want, kind of thing. But also, there needs to be a groundwork of roads, schools, everything that government provides.
Right. And I understand, and I've talked to a lot of libertarians. In fact, I probably call myself a libertarian for a short amount of time back in college, but it's all predicated on the individual. The individual is the sole arbiter of what is right and moral and just, and it comes down to you as an individual, and that the individual has to be protected, because that's the smallest minority that there can possibly be, is you. And I understand that, but you kneecap yourself if you say, well, I can do whatever I want, and no one else can ever tell me what to do, because that's not how society works. It's not. You can't say, well, I'm going to drive this gas guzzler that blows coal ash all over my town because, well, I'm an individual and that's what I want to do. Well, the other people in your town may not like that, So should they have the right to say, hey, cut that out? I think so. So that's the difference between left and liberal is liberals can mostly come together and say, well, if we can all agree on something, then we can set up a plan, set up a restriction, a law, anything, so that we can all be on the same page.
Doesn't that detract from their idea of being liberals if they're all agreeing on something?
Kind of. I know liberals don't agree on everything, and I disagree with a lot of liberals. But as far as the principles go, is that if we want to accomplish anything, we have to work together. So there has to be a framework for that. And if there has to be some kind of structure like government, taxes, and all these things that come along with society to help that, push that along, then that's fine. I'm not going to be opposed to it just because I have some principle that I have to follow,
It's exactly why I had a lot of time for Rand Paul. I had a lot of time for Rand Paul at one point.
Remind me who he is.
He's a curly-haired blonde man who's white with he's a Republican, I think, and he always talks about liberty, but in a nice way. Does that help?
Yeah. So you used to have time for him, did you say?
Yeah, but I stopped having time for him because I actually listened to one of his speeches in whole rather than segments.
Yeah, Rand Paul is not a huge fan of the free exchange of ideas. He's a libertarian that follows those principles where the government doesn't belong in places where I say it doesn't. And so I can agree with Rand Paul on some things like NSA spying. Should the government be monitoring all internet traffic of its population? I don't think so. I don't think that's a good idea. I understand the national security arguments for it, you know, and I get the utility for it. But I don't think that the government has. I think that blatantly violates the Fourth Amendment of our Constitution. And me and him can agree on that. But also, can you regulate fossil fuel companies from producing CO2? You know, can you get them? Can you institute a regulation that says, hey, you can only produce this much, otherwise you pay a fee? He says, no, you're stifling business. You're eliminating someone's individual freedom by doing that. And that's where we have to disagree, because I'm not following an ideology. I'm trying to do what's the most reasonable, sensible, effective thing to do, you know?
So is it kind of a general point? Because I don't know a lot about libertarianism, but it's like, look, if we can make capitalism nicer, we might as well stick with it. Is that the kind of thing we're talking about here?
Capitalism is a lot more. I mean, libertarianism is a lot more extreme. It's like we have our freedoms, we can do what we want, and it's the whole idea that they disregard the idea of roads, schools, water, electricity, gas.
Yeah, and my problem with them is that they're not solution-oriented people. You know, they're
Mad Max.
Yeah, it's a lot of them. You know, the far end of that would be anarcho-capitalism, where you eliminate government and let business decide what's best for the public. And that,
it's very passive, isn't it? Really, yeah.
It's childish ideology. I just need to have a wee.
Yeah, and so you say things like, well,
I've been having a wee while I've been talking to you. It's no excuse, is it, Cody? Really? Sorry, carry on. Oh, to come off the conversation. You're on computers. I'm on a phone. You see, so I cut the audio off, cut the video off, went and had a wee while I was still listening to the conversation.
Nice. Yeah, I'm just
I just thought you needed to know that, Cody. I thought it was important to share.
Sharing's caring.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I think where progressives, which aren't typical liberals, fall into the whole mix is that we got to work with who we can work with, where we can work with them. So
yeah.
When libertarians say we don't want NSA spying, I agree. We will team up with the libertarians to get that done. When the far left says we don't want religion of any size, shape, or form to be taught in public schools, I don't fully agree with that, but I get it. I understand it, and I will help fight for that, you know? So it's kind of picking your battles and picking who your friends should be and deciding what policies you can work together on. Yeah.
No, there needs to be a lot more joined up in thinking in that way just to cooperate. But it's very adversarial, isn't it? UK and US politics and things like that, isn't it?
Yeah. You know? I actually like y'all's form of government better. I think the parliamentary system works a bit better than ours because we don't. Y'all don't have like an executive branch that dictates the direction, right? That can stop or move anything that they want.
Yeah.
Yeah. I prefer it not be that way. I would love a president to run on part of the platform being we're going to decrease executive power. You could team up with libertarians all day long on that one. They'd love that, you know.
Anyway, just before, because I'm going to go off before, not very long from now, but I've really enjoyed talking to you all. I think maybe it'd be good now we've kind of ironed out a few of the technical hitches with this Google Hangout and all that. I'm sure we'll have a few more, but you know, we seem to got the idea. Maybe we could talk about some very specific themes that we might be discussing, so that in the sensible group we can say we're having a hangout to talk about blah 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 blah. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and Ori were actually going back and forth, agreeing and disagreeing on all sorts of things like about criminal justice reform. And we're like, this is a fantastic debate to have on air because there's so many different areas to talk about. You know, so I hope that's one of the future talks we can have, is have a debate or a conversation about criminal justice reform.
Yeah, yeah. I'd be interested also to talk about, it's probably more of a modding thing than a general thing, but no, it's actually a general thing about language on social media. Came up in a thing, not a massive thing, but someone used schizophrenia to talk about the president, and I was not so. Well, I'm quite trigger happy with mute buttons and all things like that. But you know, I think it's a good conversation to have. What kind of language we'd just warn against, or block, mute, not block, when it's out there in the public. You know, I think that might be a good conversation to have.
Yeah, I don't think
Dave, can I ask?
You guys do.
What do you think that in the context they use it, that the president wasn't being schizophrenic?
No, you see, he's coming from what I'd say a very similar space to me. You know, I can understand the intention, but I'm just thinking of parallel things as well, because I think disability and mental health are probably, it's probably the least regarded in society, you know, out of all the different things. And we still, I mean, I asked somebody actually about that exact situation, someone with schizophrenia. How would you feel? Would you ask them to edit, delete? You know, I asked them, and they said no, I'd just let it go probably. But that person was an older person, and like myself, you're resilient, and you look at the intentions of what someone's saying, and you don't like kind of go all kind of PC on them. You just understand the intentions and might say something. But I'm just thinking of younger people. I mean, for example, if they just hear all the time, the president's really gay now, isn't he? After he's done something like that, you know, what a faggot, you know, that kind of thing.
That's a jump between, like, he's being a bit gay and calling him a faggot.
No. What I'm saying is that it's not so much about the target or the intention. It's about somebody who isn't quite so comfortable in their own skin, hearing that quite often, using stuff like mental illness as a metaphor for something else, you know. So the argument's usually, well, it's okay if it means the thing I mean it to mean, but it's sometimes just the effect it can have on people who are just kind of not fully in the conversation. Do you know what I mean?
Half.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, though, probably not the best time now. I think that might be another good topic, maybe, and something we can carry on talking about in the modding group, because this is a YouTube thing, sensible group, isn't it? This is more,
Yeah, but anything that hurts, like, that a mod sensibilities. I mean, I chose you guys because you're great, and you have much more sensitivity to things than I do, because I'm pretty rugged, but like immune to such things. But your sensitivity and ability to sense things that may hurt people is valued. and I don't want to dismiss that in any way. So everything that you say is completely cool. It's just, I think, because that is the sort of thing that, like, schizophrenic means to me, you say something, you don't mean it, and then you'll say something else which is contradictory to that, and you're just misbalanced in terms, and you have no idea what you're saying. So
is this like a gaffe that happened in the UK like recently?
No, it's just something that happened on our group. Someone said something which was, and someone said that Trump was being schizophrenic.
Well, I mean, schizophrenic to me, that's a medical term. So, you know, like if you're saying he's acting schizophrenic, that's one thing. If you're saying he is schizophrenic, you're meaning something entirely different, you know. When people use those types of words, like I used to use the word retard all the time, you know, when I came across things that were too stupid to entertain. But I understand that if someone with that disability were to read that, would be offended by it. I understand, you know, and it's not directed at those people. But because I'm not trying to offend those people, I'm better off using different language, you know?
Yeah.
That's exactly true. I think we should go for Cody's definition.
Yeah, I like that.
Because I'm open to people using strong language if they're trying to make a point. But if you're getting to where all I'm trying to do is hurl hyperbole at people, you lose the conversation completely, and now you're just in a shouting match, you know. And when you use terms like that, you just open it up to that.
Yeah, it derails things somewhat, doesn't it, as well?
Misdirects things.
Because now we're not talking about the topic anymore. We're talking about, should you use that word to describe this or not, you know?
I suppose we are. And I suppose, like, it's how do you mod that, you know? That's a modding question. And because I'm always very trigger happy, you know. Right, mute. Then I'll tell you later. But you know, I do like to be balanced on those things, because I'm not a very hard and fast person at all in terms of these things. I'm always quite open to other perspectives on this. Like Jeremy says, well, we've said what we feel, and other people chimed in with the same point. So it might as well leave it as it is. And that's a good point, actually. It's fine by me. It's not like I've got this idea, oh, no, that should happen. You know, it's just, but I think it's an interesting conversation, language, and especially using language that's, you know, may affect certain groups of people. Yeah.
You're a moral compass for the group. So if it affects you, and then because I have a disassociation from it, from almost everything, which is why I chose you guys, who are all great, to help me kind of guide the group. So if you feel it, then express it in like the mod chat and stuff, and then we'll converse about it. And if it is. If it goes beyond a line or something, or if the point is that we all exist on different spectrums. So if it goes into a spectrum where you feel like it hurts you, then it's going to hurt someone else who could be a member of the group who potentially wouldn't be because of that comment. So
I mean, certainly I've not felt any kind of great sensitivity or kind of offense myself with that issue. Didn't, you know, specifically affect me, but I suppose that's, you know, just that's how we kind of should think, isn't it? Just the other person who we might not know their identity, you know.
Exactly.
It's always worth thinking about.
In my mind, there's not a problem until someone says there is one, you know, like, so if somebody is running a group of people down, and then I'm happy to let that person say what they got to say, because maybe I could learn something from that. I may disagree with them 100%, but I may get a better idea of where they're coming from, you know, and they could be going off about, you know, Muslims and liberals and all these things, and just using all this hyperly charged language. I'm welcome to let that go until someone's like, yeah, I don't appreciate that, you know?
Yeah.
And you're being disingenuous, you know, with how you're representing these groups of people. At that point, you have a conflict, and then you can address it. And I find the best way is when you see somebody using a lot of charged language is to get them to explain, what do you mean by that? You know, be specific. You know, if you're saying, well, like y'all were saying, like, this person's acting schizophrenic. Okay, what do you mean? Like, be specific. What do you mean? Like, dial this in. You wouldn't have posted if you didn't thought about it, right? So give us your thoughts on it. And if it boils down to is like, I was just trying to be a dick, then okay, cool. We're done. We're done with it. You know, you were just trying to be a dick. And everybody can go back to their lives and stop being offended, and just curtail it there, you know.
But in juxtaposition,
certainly the person wasn't trying to be a dick. You know, it was just it's just language that becomes, you know, it's used before and just repeated, maybe unthinkingly, or maybe, you know, didn't think the same thing I did. So it wasn't someone trying to actually be offensive at all. It's just that I always think that you can silence people in forums, online. You might think someone eventually will complain, but people eventually just sidle off and disappear. You know, I'm thinking of the classroom. If some kids calling another kid gay, you know, and they don't think they're being homophobic, it's just the language they use. But the effect it has on silencing somebody else in the room who is gay, they're not going to suddenly come out, are they? You know, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, the point is that there's that statement that's been made, and perhaps someone, if they was to first come into the group and they was to see that as a first comment, they would be like, whoa, this isn't a group for me, kind of thing.
Although maybe they see that comment and then they see our discussion underneath, and that might make them feel a little bit more at home, you know,
that's the best way for it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are trying to stop anybody from speaking, you know. It's more about how are you speaking, you know. If you're trying to make a point, you know, if you're trying to make a
underestimate me, Cody. I'm quite a fascist.
But
no.
when people come in and all they're trying to do is get a rise out of people, you know, that I'm not cool with, you know, and that stuff will, you know, probably be removed, or if that person keeps it up, they'll just have to leave. And we try to do it all this in a way, like especially the way we moderate. For some of the decisions we've made, we've been a little bit more democratic about it, you know, unless someone has just, you know, pulled the chute and said, nope, I don't appreciate this on any level. This is not helpful. This is not nice. This is just garbage that someone decided to put on our page. And we'll unilaterally say, nope, bye. Most of the time we'll support that person, you know, because for most of the mods, or I'd say all the mods, that threshold is pretty high, you know, for what we will and won't allow.
The only thing I had a problem with was like whenever we have a problem with the mods and stuff, we don't have, if any of the mods have a problem, we talk to each other about it, and I just saw like John had just deleted a load of posts. And I was like, John, why did you delete all of those posts? Kind of thing. And then he kind of, like, for 50% of them, they were okay. One of them was just like, he posted something which was insensitive to my post, which I posted earlier, and I was just like, yeah, that's not really cool. But yeah,
I mean,
we need to talk about it.
Agree on everything, you know. You got to have opposing viewpoints to have a conversation, right?
Exactly.
That's it. Yeah, yeah. It balances out because I'm the same though. I'm like what do you just talk about, John? I sometimes just think, right, I hope I'm like doing this, but I'm going to go straight into the mute or post pending thing, do it afterwards, chat about it, and people say, oh, well, yeah, no, that was the right decision, or they say, well, maybe not, but it seems like we have quite a good relationship to be able to give and take,
Oh, entirely. When you was just like the gun post from that guy, which was ages ago.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to see that when
Oh,
the
yeah.
the group. I'm gonna block that. That's perfectly fine.
Well, it's funny because you could tell by his intent was, I'm going to try and trigger some people with this. Like I know
Oh,
that
yeah.
there's a lot of liberals in this group, and maybe they don't have, they don't feel too strongly about guns. So I'm gonna post me a picture of using a great gun here, and see how many people I can upset. That's not constructive. That's not needed. And I tried to, and I went in there and was like, well, I wanted to ask some kind of question, like, how does this fire? Is it single burst or like fully automatic? And like someone had shut down the comments by after I asked that question. I was like, yeah, that's probably the right decision, because where I was trying to, I was just trying to start a conversation, whereas everybody else was hurling insults at each other.
Yeah, I think that was it during a time when we were still kind of the breakaway group, weren't we, though? We've got our own identity now. It's not in comparison with another Facebook group anymore. We're just ourselves now, aren't we?
Yeah, in the other group, there's only about like 4 or 5 active members, and it's completely stagnated. There's no real discussion to be had. It's mostly just us hurling insults at each other, and sometimes that's a sweet release. That the other group would be the other side of the coin to our group. Where we're trying to get down to business and like have a conversation and like discuss things and share our viewpoints and our perspectives. The other one's just like, I'm entrenched in what I believe, and I'm going to insult you until you believe me, or I'm just going to try and hurt your feelings. And that's like completely the opposite of what we're trying to do. It's really funny just how much of a divergence there was. They went completely in opposite directions.
So you was in the original group, Cody? Like
I'm still in there.
Oh, so am I.
I talk to people from here to there. Sometimes we have some okay conversations. Sometimes I find myself agreeing with people that I can't stand, which is interesting. I'm always surprised when that happens. Like me and you have completely different ideologies, and yet on this one thing we're in complete agreement about, and we're coming at it from completely different perspectives, different principles, different ideologies, and yet we are here in the same spot. It blows my mind sometimes, like how we're able to do that as human beings. We can hate everything about this person, but it's like, oh, but that one thing you said, absolutely, I completely agree with that. You're awesome for that.
That is the complete modus operandi of the guy who made that group. He was just like, there's no lines that can be drawn. We can say whatever we want, and you have to find a happy medium. And I was just like, well, this isn't working, so I'm going to make my group.
Yeah, it's mostly squawking at each other in there, but whatever, blow off some steam.
Yeah, it's always good to try, I think, when you're in kind of debate with someone, to try and agree with them as much as you can, or see what possible kind of arguments there could be to change your own mind. That's the kind of debate in discussion that I enjoy the most, is trying to prove yourself wrong, in seeing what they've got to say and let it push you as far as you can, but you don't get that on a lot of forums in Facebook groups, especially the very large debate groups, but I think we do have that. That's why I like Ori, because he makes me think from a different perspective. I don't think we should be talking about people who are not here maybe at the moment, should we? But he makes but he makes me think, like, oh, I think I'm right. Then Ori says something. I thought, oh, right, okay. I hadn't thought of it like that. So, I like that. That's what I appreciate,
Yeah, and I don't know how many other people are going to watch this later. We'll post the video in the group to see if this will help people come into it, because I'd like us to get 10 or so people in here and have a good conversation about something.
That would be great.
Yeah, I would love that. Those always turn out to be really fun. Most of the ones that I see on the internet, you can boil it down to two people that are having a discussion, and a lot of people who are interjecting when they know something. They say, well, like, here's employment went down. I can't remember the number. Someone can chime in and say, hey, I've got that number. Those are a lot of fun to have, and that's what I hope to have with this, and that's what I want to do, is to have fun with it, have get people together and talk to each other and disagree on things, and learn about each other. That's the big one. Is I'd love to learn more about UK politics and how the way you guys look at the world, as well as you guys getting a mirror into how we look at the world, because I bet we agree. I know we agree on a ton of things, but I'm sure there's some things that we don't agree on, and I'd love to nail down what those things are.
Yeah,
that'd be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, well, it's nice to chat with you both face to face, and
I think this is a good
I'm not going straight to sleep yet, so I might message you and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm gonna call it a night on this now.
Yeah, it's getting very late over there. Bye.
So,
farewell, David.
Probably still here. I'm a little bit shit at these things. There you go. There you go. Am I still here? I'm still here.
Jesus Christ, he's still here. We can't talk about him. Oh, he's gone.
Oh, there we go. Well, cool. I think this went really well. It was just a little proof of concept that we were trying to do. So I think we accomplished that. Do you have anything that you want to say to the members of the group, or any last thoughts you want to leave with anybody?
Oh, shit, man. I didn't think of anything like that. What, so this is going like live or something?
Yeah, this is going out live on YouTube, but I'll post the link to it in the group. And, like anybody in the group that's watching this video right now, if you like the conversation that's happening here, we'll set another one of these up at a later date. We don't know when just yet, but it'll probably be within the next month or so. And we'd love to have you on and have you come in and talk and give your perspective. And who knows, you may make some friends, or get some pen pals. This is all to have a good time,
Yeah, just discuss things that we have in common.
Exactly. But I think this is probably a good place to end it here. And you people out there, keep staying sensible.
Yeah, keep it up, man. Thanks.
Have a good night, Zach.
You too, man.
Bye.
Bye.